Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. It's my pleasure to be here again, continues our series of Cine webinars. So before welcoming our today's guest, I would like to give you some new information about Cine. So Cine is a Center for Innovation on New Energies. It is a partnership between Shell and FAPESP, who have now about 200 researchers. And I'd like to share with you some news about our center. So the first one is that we are delighted to announce the two new members of the International Advisory Board. Professor Osvaldo Novaes de Oliveira. Here in Brazil, everybody knows him as a Chu. Chu is professor in the Physics Institute in the University of São Paulo. And also Chu is executive chief of the ACS Applied Materials and Interfaces. And the second member of the international member of our board is Professor Prasant Kamat from Notre Dame University in US. Professor Kamat is the editor-in-chief of the ACS Energy Letters. So thank you for accepting our invitation and welcome to the team. And also I'd like to announce our new communication team. Professor Juarez Silva has just recently took over the position as coordination, as a communication coordinator of our center. And together with Professor Juarez, we have now working with us Veronica Savignano, is a journalist, and also we have Mari as a secretary, and Marcelo here that is organizing our webinars is now here in somewhere on the backstage. So before I pass the words to Professor Elizabeth Santiago, I just would like to remind you that this webinar is being broadcasted through YouTube. So the audience, you can post your questions during the talk, and your questions are going to be passing here on our screen and happily answered by our guests. So I'd like to welcome to our studio Professor Elizabeth Santiago.
Hello, morning.
Thank you, everyone. Okay, so I'm going to leave you. Okay, good luck. Bye-bye.
Thank you. So first of all, I would like to thank you, Professor and Dario Dekel, for accepting the Cine's invitation to participate in this event. So recently, IPEM started a collaboration with Professor Dekel in area of anionic membranes for electrochemical devices. I'm sure that this collaborative partnership is very important for us and for Cine, and it's a very pleasure to take Professor Dekel here today. So Professor Dekel, after receiving his PhD from Technion, Israel Institute of Technology, Dr. Dekel managed 50 researchers to develop high-temperature batteries in Rafael Limited. In 2007, Dr. Dekel co-founded Cell Era Incorporation, today PioCell Tech, where as VP R&D, he led 15 researchers to develop the AEMFC technology. So in 2015, he joined the Technion as an associated professor, where he currently leads the largest worldwide research group entirely devoted to developing the AEMFC technology. Professor Dekel holds more than 100 patents and papers on battery and fuel cell technologies, and manages about $4 million company and government research grants from Israel, Europe, and USA. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation, Dario. And please, your turn. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Good morning or good evening, wherever you are. First of all, Elizabeth, for your kind introduction. Thank you very much for the invitation. A pleasure to virtually share this stage with you. And thank you also to Fabio Fonseca for the invitation. And My talk will be about anion exchange membrane fuel cells. As Elizabeth mentioned, this is the focus of my research. I am in the Technion for the past 5 years, and I'm fully devoted to develop this technology. So let me, before I start talking about the technology, so to provide you some facts about Israel that some people know, some others do not. So as you can see, you actually cannot see in the map, we are in a very, very little corner of the Middle East. So I put for you guys that are in Brazil. So this small point here, I would say this is Israel as compared to you. So I made a better probably comparison, a more fair comparison. So even the state of Sao Paulo is much larger, 11 times than our tiny country. So this is a very small country. We are 9 million today, population growing very fast. We have three different official languages, Hebrew, Arabic, and English. But if you are on the street in Israel, you will hear much more than that. Um, this small area, I really don't know, but I believe that the Metro Sao Paulo, not just in population much higher, but the area is probably compared to Metro Sao Paulo. So we're a very tiny country. However, probably you hear about some of the cities like Jerusalem or Tel Aviv. So we at the Technion are in Haifa. Haifa is the third largest city in Israel. So we are in the north of Israel. We are located near the Mediterranean coast. So just from the campus at the Technion, a few 10 minutes driving, you are in the very nice beaches in the Mediterranean. And this is the only city in Israel that we have two universities. Technion is one of them. So a few words about Technion. Technion was founded even before the state of the Israel was founded. It was more than 100 years of history of the Technion. Is ranked number one university, the top in Israel. And the ranking, if you look at Shanghai university ranking, so we are more or less close to 100. So it's similar if you are uh, Penn State, let's say, university, more or less ranking of State University. So it's a medium university, medium-sized university. Probably talking with you, I will need to say this is a very small university. I believe your university is much larger. So inside the Technion, we are a group of 20 people, students and researchers. We are fully devoted on the study, investigation and development of an ion exchange membrane fuel cells. We do all what we need to do in order to make fast progress of this development of this technology. So we develop a catalyst, we develop membranes, and we have, of course, modeling, testing, characterization, synthesis, all what we need to do up to the level of cells. And we do not work yet with stacks, but with many other colleagues. So we push this technology towards the implementation in automotive. This is what I like, a mobile application. However, of course, like normal fuel cells and ion exchange membrane fuel cells can also be used in different applications like stationary application at home, for instance. Together with many collaborations. And as Beche Santiago mentioned, we are collaborating with her as well and her group. So this is a growing number of collaboration worldwide, as you can see in the map. And we are proud of it. And thanks to that, actually, and to the work of our team, we are making very fast progress in the technology. So just for those who are not familiar with the technology, an ion exchange membrane fuel cell, actually this is the same like a proton exchange membrane fuel cell that you can see here in the left. But instead of having a proton exchange membrane that we conduct proton from the anode to the cathode, we just have a solid polyelectrolyte anion exchange membrane that actually we conduct hydroxide from the cathode to the anode. In this way, we have all the advantages of a solid state PEM fuel cells. However, instead of having a very acidic medium that is very problematic and corrosive, we have a mild alkaline medium. So we have different electrochemical reactions, and having a mild alkaline pH of 10 or so. So we can use different materials that will be much more affordable, and that is actually the reason why to have and why to develop this new technology for fuel cells. So I would like to think about this technology to be the next generation of fuel cell technology instead of the acidic one that we use today in cars like a Toyota or General Motors or Nissan or Honda. So we would like to eventually be ready with this technology and exchange that. And the reason, again, that's to eliminate all the cost platinum, because if we are in alkaline, we can use affordable catalysts like iron, nickel, or cobalt, for instance. Or for instance, for the cathode, we will talk about later, you don't need even metals. You can use just carbon for the oxidation. So this is 3 orders of magnitude cheaper than platinum. And for membranes, we don't need fluorinated, very expensive monomers. We can use hydrocarbons like simple polyethylene, like Professor Elizabeth Santiago, she's working on. In that way, and also some other advantages, we can reduce the cost of these fuel cells for 50%, which is actually the main barrier of fuel cells for mass production in automotive or other applications. So if you look at the history of this technology, this is a very, very new technology. So actually we started working more or less like 1 decade ago, 10 years ago. And as you can see, I'm showing here the performance of the fuel cell. So in terms of voltage per current density or power per current density, and you can see just some representative results for every year. When I started working with that in my startup company, that was before the Technion, we were very proud to have the worldwide record that was up here in this corner. I cannot see even those results. And today, as you can see, and mainly in the past 4 years, we have a tremendous, remarkable progress. So we already succeed to reach, as a community, 3 watt per square centimeter, which is a remarkable, not just progress, but actually very high power density. I will say much higher than the PEM fuel cells at this stage. Of course, this is in development, but those are really very impressive results. So we are looking forward our new review to see where we'll be. So far, nobody beat these results, but you can clearly see the trend. And this is much faster than we achieve or the community achieved in the PEM fuel cell a few decades ago, because now we know a lot from PEM fuel cells, so we can apply all that knowledge directly to the knowledge of or to the needs of an ion exchange membrane fuel cells. So this progress, personally, I believe that was mainly due to the development, very fast development of the anion exchange membranes. So if you go back 10 years ago, we were talking about 10 millisiemens per centimeter of conductivity of OH minus, and all the world, when I started working on that, we were 4 groups worldwide, and everyone in fuel cell just try to explain us not to work on that because that will be never possible to have a hydroxide conductivity as high as the proton conductivity, because the proton is a much smaller ion. So people explain that I will never reach the, let's say, 100 millisiemens per centimeter that naphion in proton conductivity has. So I mark here the 100 more or less conductivity of proton in naphion. So you can see already in the past 3-4 years, more and more researchers actually exceed this barrier that people told us at the very beginning this is not possible to reach. The membranes, for instance, from Professor Santiago, she reaches more than 150 millisiemens per centimeter. So it's also remarkable results. We may have talk about that later. So at the Technion, although we are happy still to be the largest group fully devoted on an ion-exchange membrane fuel cell study, we still need to focus on the real needs or the most challenging aspect of this technology, and there are a few challenges. So in this, we work on all of them. In this talk, we have just a few minutes to talk about them. So I will focus on three challenges that we had progress, and those are the most difficult challenges in this technology, and we are focusing, and also other people, of course, in the world are focusing on these challenges. So the first one will be the CO2 effect, which is actually unique for an ion exchange membrane fuel cell. Um, that was the second reason people told us at the very beginning that this, not just the conductivity of the membranes will not be enough, but also there are a problem with the CO2, as normally people remember from all conventional liquid electrolyte alkaline fuel cells. Now, this is not an alkaline, a liquid electrolyte alkaline fuel cell. This is an anion exchange membrane, so it's completely solid. So we know today, we knew before as well, that this is no carbonation issues, precipitation of carbonation issues. However, the CO2 indeed affect this technology. And we, in the past, a couple of years ago, we started modeling to analyze what will be the effect of this CO2 in the fuel cells. So far, people work with hydrogen oxygen, so then they avoid to have these carbonation issues. And then in the model, we learned a few things, and some of them was not surprise, and some of them was really new. For instance, we know that when we reduce the oxygen to generate OH minus, when we work with ambient air and we have CO2, then we also produce bicarbonate and carbonate anion. So in principle, we call this technology an ion exchange membrane fuel cell and not hydroxide exchange membrane fuel cell, because in principle we are transporting those three species, those three anions through the membrane. Now we learned a lot about that, but the most probably interesting thing was that we can choose actually how this transport and how this equilibrium changes inside the membrane. So we learned, for instance, that if we operate the fuel cell at very high current densities, we increases the OH minus concentration and decreases the carbonate concentration. That means that if we work above, let's say, 1 amp per square centimeter. So in principle, the carbonate concentration will be so low that there is no effect at all. The contrary, if we work in a very low current density, we have a lot of carbonate. So at the Technion, we were wondering if that carbonate working at low current densities, we can actually transport through the membrane and we can release through the anode. In that case, that will be some problem, but will be different problem, because if we release that, that means that we can live with this carbonate and this is not an issue. So we developed a technique trying to study this release of self-release. Some call it the CO2 inside. Um, we started the membrane with bicarbonate anions, and then we in situ generate on the surface of the membrane some OH minus by splitting water into protons and hydroxides. And then we saw that these hydroxides actually are kind of pushing, if I may say, the bicarbonate anions, and those carbonates were released as CO2 in the anode. That was great news, and even better news that if we continue with this process, we can go all the way to the end and suddenly have just OH minus, no carbonate inside. And the reason that we know that is because we measure the conductivity through time during this self-release process or decarbonation process. And we found at the very beginning we have very low conductivity, and this is because the bicarbonate is huge, an ion. This is a big anion as compared to H minus. And as we release the carbonate, or as we exchange the carbonate by the H minus, we see that conductivity goes up until we reach an equilibrium. In this equilibrium, actually, we know that all the membrane is on OH minus, meaning in principle, in the fuel cell, we can apply current in such a way that we can transport the CO2 or the carbonate to the anode and release through the anode. So that was a really not our intention, but a really very nice technique, because today actually we use this technique to measure the real OH minus conductivity. We call it the true OH minus conductivity, which actually do not need any liquid electrolyte as we were doing until a couple of years ago. So this is a really nice technology. A technique, sorry, that we keep using and develop that technique. And we found that with this technique, actually conductivity that we measure is always higher than the conductivity that the developers of membranes claim to have, because they have carbonation inside the membrane. And of course, with carbonation, you measure lower conductivity. So this is, for instance, one paper in preparation, thanks to the great collaboration with Ana Laura Biancoli and Elizabeth Santiago. You can see Professor Santiago's membranes, the conductivity reaching around 140 millisiemens, and we have new results that are even higher than that. So those are really very promising worldwide level quality of membranes that we keep interested, and we will keep working with them as we do, thanks to this collaboration. So keep talking about these techniques. So most of the leaders in the technology, they adopted this technique and even improved that technique. Some people, for instance, my colleague in Canada, apply different pH indicators on the membrane during this technique, and actually they could see the change in color, as you can see here, due to the pH increase, meaning once we have here the low pH and we are exchanging and pushing the carbonates with OH minus, we have higher and higher pH. So you can see here some indicator that at pH of 9 change color. So we can see actually which pH at which time the membrane has, depending on the current density that we pass through the membrane. So it's very interesting. We keep working and develop and learn more about this technique. For instance, now we are in this recent publication, the recent work, we actually are characterizing how fast we can release this CO2 through the membrane by using different membranes. For instance, this is a PPO membrane with different characteristics, different IC, different charges, density, and we can see how fast in several cases we can release that. So those membranes that are good membranes in terms of conductivity, however, they are very slow release of CO2, they will not be suitable for fuel cells, but this membrane will be excellent, but very quickly can exchange and can release this CO2 when we work with ambient air. So we found really good, interesting data using this technique also. As you can see, we can measure at higher temperature than 100 degrees Celsius. And actually, this was the beginning of the, I would say, hopefully a new type of fuel cell that we call high temperature anion exchange membrane fuel cell. So you can see we can go all the way to 120 degrees Celsius, and nowadays we're trying to go farther even. And as you can see, the conductivity of hydroxide conductivity at this temperature are incredibly high. We are passing the 300 millisiemens centimeter, reminding you that Nafion has around 100 millisiemens per centimeter. So those are really new results that every month we're getting new data, and everyone is actually worldwide record of the previous records in terms of conductivity. We keep working also once we exchange all the bicarbonates so we can have a real OH minus situation inside the membrane. So we are using this technique now to measure the stability and keeping the membrane in OH minus. I will talk about stability later, but this is also new, very elegant and very practical and simple technique that we can assess what is the chemical stability of the membranes in alkaline medium. So another challenge, I would say very important challenge also nowadays in these years in this technology are the electrocatalysts. All the idea to remind you is to remove the platinum from the acidic PEM fuel cells. So we are actually all the work that we do, most of the people do in terms of the electrocatalysts for this technology are platinum-free catalysts they develop and they study. So we started doing a very large review that we published a couple of years ago that all what you need to know about the hydrogen oxidation reaction. And most of the people that are familiar with PEM fuel cell, they will even not understand why we study this electrochemical reaction. The reason is in acidic medium, this reaction is very fast. That is also not important and not being studied. However, in alkaline, we have a huge challenge with the hydrogen oxidation reaction. This is really a complicated reaction, and the over potential, the voltage that we lose using catalyst here is actually much more higher than the acidic. So we were studying at the very beginning why is so different kinetics between the acidic and the alkaline, and this is already an issue of study in the past, I would say, couple of years. We believe that one of the reasons, of course, that the electrochemical reactions are completely different. You can see here in acidic medium for PEM fuel cell, it's a very simple reaction that you oxidize the hydrogen and generate the proton and electrons, and that's it. So the kinetics are very fast and very simple reaction. However, in the anion exchange membrane fuel cell in alkaline medium, first huge change, we have two reactants. We don't have just the hydrogen, we have the hydrogen and a couple of hydroxides. So to the surface of the catalyst, whatever the catalyst will be, we need not just to bring the hydrogen, but also two large ions to the surface and the same place of the surface of the catalyst. So this is kinetically limited. And also we are generating water in the anode here in this reaction. We do not have water here, so it's much simpler. If we have water and we have 2 molecules of water per molecule of hydrogen, so we have a lot of water in the electrode. When you look at the catalyst, actually, as we generate the water, we are generating a liquid film that actually increases the resistance, the transport resistance of the hydrogen to pass through the water film to reach the surface of the catalyst. So those are changes that we are not used to study, of course, in the acidic medium, and that is completely new for the alkaline. So more and more researchers in the electrocatalytic field are jumping actually to this challenge to try to help to solve it. So at the Technion, our approach was um, a little different, I would say, from others that using alloys. So we understand that we have two reactants, so we need to take care about two reactants in this electrochemical reaction. Therefore, we use two different materials. We believe that one material can take care of hydrogen. Palladium, for instance, or other metals are very good absorbers of hydrogen. And the second material being an oxophilic material, because this is a very polar species in terms of absorb the OH species. And then in the interface between those two materials, we believe we can have this electrochemical oxidation. So in the past, we were working with palladium nickel, and you can see here the polarization curves and fuel cell performance. And nickel is completely zero, palladium quite low. When we add nickel to the palladium, we have a significant increase in the performance. The same we did later with ceria. We use ceria as a oxophilic material. We decorate ceria onto palladium. Today, actually, we decorate small dots of palladium onto ceria because ceria is much cheaper than palladium. And then we have a tremendous increase in the performance due to this bifunctional synergy between both materials. So very recently, last year, we succeed to have another records using palladium ceria. You can see we have a 1.4 watt per square centimeter with palladium ceria. This is really very nice performance of this catalyst. And this year we keep working on that, and we are actually moving to more precise or maybe more complicated, but much more or better, I would say, improve systems to produce these nanoparticles. So this work is a collaboration with the University of Connecticut in the States. We use flame pyrolysis, they are expert in, and we succeed to increase the performance of the catalyst by changing the morphology of the catalyst. So we keep working this year with another collaboration with in Ohio in the States, now using the controlled surface reaction. This is a very unique reaction that actually, as you can see here, we can apply very, very small nanodots of ceria around the palladium. In this way, we succeed to get the record of activity for HOR with this ceria palladium. And another time, we prove that the putting this ceria around the palladium, we can get better results in the fuel cells. So we keep working with this. So far, we're getting better results that maybe next year, early next year, we will be able to share. And by the way, this is just a request from my students. They send me this slide that actually this STEM map that I used to show from Syria Palladium reminds them the COVID-19 virus photos that they have. So I believe they see virus everywhere in this time. But in any case, I don't see the similarity, but that was a request from them. Uh, so we, as I said, we keep working on that, and sometimes we go back to fundamentals and not just to develop nano particles for catalysts, because we need to understand a little more what is going on here. And recently, with a collaboration with Jülich in Germany, we have using atomic layer deposition, we have apply a serial layer onto platinum layer, or palladium and platinum layer. And we found that as we have more and more ceria, we're covering or burying the palladium. Actually, we have better and better activities and also better and better stability. So we know now what happened and what we need to do, and we need to come back to nanoparticles and try to cover the palladium completely with Syria, and that theoretically, according to this new data, we will be able to keep increasing the activities, therefore the fuel cell performance. So very shortly, we are also trying to study different supports for catalysts. This has been done, for instance, for PEM fuel cell in acidic medium. But again, now we need to open the books, and we have the entire new world and new possibilities in alkaline because the electrochemical reactions are different and everything is different. So we are working, for instance, on carbides as a support. So we found a very interesting interaction between tantalum carbides and platinum palladium. So we believe we may be able to come with new ideas of new support that maybe were forgotten in the acidic medium, but now in alkaline, this is a new type of study. We work a lot on DFT in the electrocatalyst. We started talking a couple of years ago that maybe the hydrogen bonding energy that normally in the acidic medium we calculate is not enough to determine which catalysts are the best. And maybe also what we call the OH binding energy need to be considered. So maybe instead of having a one-dimensional or two-dimensional volcanoplot for electrocatalysts, now we need to start plotting all the materials into this type of 3D volcanoplot because we need to take two different parameters or descriptions in order to understand what happened in alkali medium. So we did that in the past, a couple of years ago. We started working with nickel and nickel metals. We keep working on that in these years. We found that electrochemically speaking or chemically speaking, the nickel iron actually has the highest stability as compared to others like nickel copper or nickel molybdenum that other groups are working with. And very recently, I would say a few days ago, we submitted this paper that this is a nickel iron with a high concentration of nickel that actually we succeed for the first time to have a CRM-free and ion-exchange membrane fuel cell. CRM is a critical raw material, so it's not just precious metal free, palladium free is also free of any cobalt or other critical raw materials that in the United States, only Europe are people try to avoid that. So we are very happy to see this new type of catalyst, although the performance is still far from what we get with palladium. However, it's very promising that actually we can find some PGM-free or CRM-free electrocatalysts for this technology. Having said that, if you look at this is a modeling that we are working on this modeling of the fuel cell in these days. You cannot see even here the overpotential of the hydrogen oxidation. However, you can see huge overpotential of the oxygen reduction reaction for the cathode. And this is the reason that we do not need to forget the oxygen reduction reaction for the cathode because we can gain a lot if we develop new, better catalysts for the cathode. So as I mentioned before, we in the cathode, we actually do not need even iron, even if it is very affordable, or cobalt. Actually, you can use metal-free catalysts. So we are doping carbons with different heteroatoms like nitrogen and sulfur or halides. And this is a new work that we are going to publish next month. And you can see the performance are really remarkable, just changing in all the fuel cells, changing which heteroatoms we dope the carbon. So this is a cathode electrocatalyst with completely metal free. So no precious metal, no CRM, nothing actually, just carbon. So this is very, very affordable. You can see this is just the beginning. So there are other groups worldwide actually also, sorry, working on this technology. So very quickly, we're also studying the interactions between the catalyst and the ionomeric materials. So this is very new. In no much studies are done in the acidic mediums. We have platinum alloys that we know. We have the naphion that we all know. So the interaction is very well known. Here, there are no standards electrocatalysts. We are developing them. There are no standards membranes and ionomers, so we are developing them. So all the entire books of materials are open for this technology. So this is a real opportunity for people that are in research to jump to a very new field and have a real progress in it. So the last topic I will talk will very shortly will be on stability. So this is probably the number one, the highest challenge in this technology, the performance stability. As I mentioned before, the initial performance during the past years was the progress was remarkable, and we have a few watts per square centimeter. However, when you see what happened with the longevity, so this how to keep this performance for long time, you will see plots like this, summarizing a very a few um, studies. And what you can see is that more or less people can reach 1,000 hours. Very recently, one colleague of mine reached 2,000 hours, but this is around 1,000 hours, and most of the groups actually reach less than 500 hours. So this is a real challenge how to keep this high performance during thousand and thousand of hours that we need. For instance, for automotive application, we need to be above 8,000 hours. So we are far from what we need from automotive. And this is a real challenge in this technology. So many people, I would say most of the research done in this field of an ion exchange membrane fuel cell have been done focusing on the stability of the functional group. So people, we all believe that those functional groups that are inside the ion exchange membranes are cations fixed to whatever the backbone is in the membrane, and those are very non, I would say, not so stable in alkaline. So in principle, the OH minus that we generate and we transport through the membrane attack in different ways, as we reviewed a couple of years ago. And therefore, you lose your cation, you lose the conductivity of the membrane, therefore, you lose the performance. So we have been working on the model, a very comprehensive 1D model, numerical model, and we found that the reason for that degradation, or I would say the main reason for that degradation, is a lack of water here in the cathode. So if you can see, for instance, here lambda, which is a water per OH minus, or the amount of normalized amount of water inside the cell, we have a lot of water in the anode, obviously, because we generate water in the anode. However, in the cathode, we have very low amount of water. So we have, for instance, 8 or 10 water molecules per OH minus. And if you change the current density, for instance, you can go down to 2 or even to 1 water per OH minus. That means that we have really very low levels of lambda, very low levels of water. So we made a DFT and also experimental test changing, for instance, applying alkaline medium to this cation, which is normally the standard cation in an ion exchange membrane fuel cell. When we found we have 4 or more water per OH minus. So this is quite stable for hundreds of hours, similar to the time of fuel cells. However, when we reduce the number of water to 2 or 1, we can see that in just 500 hours, we have 50% loss of cations, which is what happened actually in the cathode. So in the completely happy and completely stable, the membrane is not so stable in the surface of the cathode. And again, this is because of the water that is acting like a steric protective shield around the OH minus. If you do not have water, this energy of activation of this reaction makes this attack a very fast and very aggressive hydroxide, and then degradation happen. So we confirmed that a couple of years later by molecular dynamics. So we found that if you have this reaction, the distance between the OH minus to the carbon or to the hydrogen of the carbon is getting smaller and smaller as you take the water out. So that is confirming our theory and our experimental results. So we were all the way to real ionomers on real membranes, and we found the same trend. We found that if you have a membrane like PPO in this case, lambda 8, so you have many water molecules, is completely stable. You can see for more than 1000 hours. However, if you have lambda 4 or 0, it's just a few hours and you do not have membrane anymore. And this is what happened in the membrane in the fuel cell when we operate the fuel cell. So the membrane side of the anode, it behaves like this, very stable. On the cathode, behaves very unstable, and then we lose the conductivity. We took what I personally believe is the best cation so far developed. This is a cation, very bulky cation from our colleague, collaborator in Canada. And we have this publication that showed that this cation has thousands of hours. You can see more than 8,000 hours in a very aggressive alkaline medium. However, if you reduce the number of water molecules, so you have the same concentration of OH minus, but lambda 5, we are talking about hundred of hours stability, not thousand. And if we have lambda 1, we have a few hours of stability. So this is a very nice work presenting the best cation we can use in an ion exchange membrane and how this cation is affected or degrades during this lack of water environment that we have in the fuel cell. So just to finish, we are working the Technion on several cations, different cations that will be stable at this very low lambda or very low content of water environment as we have in the fuel cell during operation. So at the very beginning, we started with this cation. We thought that this carbazolium is very special and indeed was special. However, our understanding of the mechanism of reaction 1 year ago wasn't good enough because when we studied this cation at lambda 1, so very aggressive medium, alkaline medium, that was really a few hours and we degrade this cation as well. So we keep working on that. We keep insisting that this should be stable according to DFT analysis. And then we started changing also the steric, but mainly the electronic effect around the quaternarium ammonium. We came with this guy, which is a OH substituted carbazolium. And as you can see in comparison, so that is the carbazolium without substitution, different substitution, and we have OH substitution. We have the same conditions, a completely stable cation. So nowadays we keep working with this cation. However, we keep working with other cations because the fact that this is so bulky is not so easy to have a good conductivity in the membrane when we have these bulky cations. So we keep working on different cations that eventually we may publish very soon this year, I would say, another two possibilities. So why we work on that? we keep working with our numerical modeling, and you can see here two effects that we can predict. One is today obvious for the community. If we have thinner and thinner membranes, we will get better and better stability, but still around the 1,000 hours as we have today, between 1,000 and 2,000. However, if we have a 10 micron thin membrane, and instead of the regular standard cation, the trimethyl benzyl quaternarium ammonium, we have, for instance, this carbazolium, or any other cation that will be 5 times more stable than the standard one, measured at lambda 1, you can see that our model at least predict that we can move from here to here at the same current density, same temperature. We can reach 8,000 hours that we need for automotive application. So this is the reason we keep working with the model and updating the model and validating every data that we have with the fuel cells today. And also this model is used to indicate us which type of materials, electrocatalysts and membranes, we need to develop in the next generation in order to achieve this fuel cell performance stability, which is the main challenge in this technology currently speaking. So that's it for today, I believe. As I mentioned before, we work together with many, many collaborators. We cannot do everything um, alone. There are many, many experts and excellent people in AEMFC. So we try to collaborate with the best of them. And as I mentioned before, Professor Elizabeth Santiago is one of them that we collaborate in these days, and hopefully for many, many years from now. This is, by the way, another picture. The Technion is outside of the picture, but this is 5 minutes driving from these amazing, beautiful gardens that we have to the beast, to the view to the north of Israel. This is the Gulf of the port that we have, the best, the largest, sorry, port in Israel we have in our city, Haifa. With that, so I would like to thank the group. This is not updated. There are many people missing in this picture, but those are the people that actually do the work, and those are part of the funding sources that actually help us to fund financially funding this work. And we keep working more and more grants that actually encourage us to keep working on this technology. And we always increase the number of people every year. This year was very special because of the situation and the pandemic. We all hope that next year will be much better. So we have several open positions with grants for scholarship for students, and of course postdocs that are welcome to come to our group. With that, so I would like to thank you for your attention wherever you are. Thanks again for the invitation. Molto obrigado.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dario, for the very excellent talk. I think it was very introductive to the discussing the difference in the technologies of the two different developed fuel cells. We're going to start with some questions. There are several questions that we have to address to you. Okay, you can start first with one question from Professor Elizabeth Santiago, which is one of the collaborators here in Brazil, from IPEM. Basically, the advantage of the anion fuel cell is the lower cost because you can use alternative materials. However, in the last, let's say, 10 years, the increase in performance increased a lot, but this also became more expensive to make it. I mean, to think that this balance between performance, cost, how can you balance this for the anion fuel cells?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So this technology is not as mature as the PEM fuel cell. So in the acidic PEM fuel cell, we know that we reach some kind of asymptotic situation that, of course, there is a balance. If you want to reduce the cost, you reduce the loading of the platinum. Therefore, you get you create some issues in the longevity or in the stability. Here we are we're working in parallel on all these fronts that I mentioned and some others, but those are the three major challenges in this technology. When I say challenges, as a current limitations, I would say that if we have progress on those three, for instance, electrocatalysis of membrane, we will have a progress in the fuel cell parameters and performance. So we are far from being in any close asymptotic. For instance, the conductivity of the membrane, this is an excellent example. I thought when we reached 100 millisiemens per centimeter 5 years ago, if I remember well, we reach what the Nafion have more or less. So that will be myself never thought to get even more than that. That was my goal, to demonstrate all the work that we can do as Nafion. Never thought that this is we can do better. Today we are talking about more than Nafion, more conducting than Nafion. We are just a few weeks ago that we published the high temperature of Anion-Exchange membrane fuel. So we're talking about 300. And I can say today I do not see any limitation, any intrinsic limitation in that. And this was achieved not by going to very fancy fluorinated anion exchange membrane fuel cell, though those numbers are achieved with grafted membrane based on polyethylene films that are commercially available, very low cost, commercially available, as the same that as Professor Santiago is using. So this is not a trade-off. This is done in parallel, lowering cost and increasing the performance. The same I can say with the electrocatalyst, although the electrocatalyst, if we have 100 papers on membranes in this technology per 100, we have one paper on electrocatalyst, because no one actually studied these electrocatalysts for these electrochemical reactions. And if they do for liquid electrolyte in the old-fashioned fuel cell that was completely different than today. So today, as I show just very shortly, we are talking about iron cobalt based or iron cobalt nitrogen carbon, the state of the art metal-free or PGM-free electrocatalyst. We are talking about metal-free electrocatalyst. We're talking about carbon, simple carbons doped with simple nitrogen and sulfur and other electroatoms. So again, we're going down in the cost, because we even don't have the need to not just platinum or palladium, but also we don't need the silver, and we're working with iron or even no metals. So we are in a very early stage, I would say, of the research. We are far from be ready yet to have these fuel cells in Mirai of automotive of Toyota and any other fuel cell automotive. However, we are far from the also the situation that we need to compromise between the cost and the performance.
Okay, thank you very much for the very, to say, explanatory answer to the comments. Means there's a long way to go. That's what this means to say. We have now a question that is was put by Fabio Coral Fonseca from ePaint, which you know very well. Means he's asking here, for example, I think the question is going to appear for you, not appear yet, but he'll just provide here. One quick question: how a viable and effective to increase the robustness of the anionic membranes by producing composite membranes in organic phases, means change the structure.
Yeah, So this is a very good question that actually there is no a clear answer yet. As I mentioned, we are in the early stage of development, so there are just a few groups. I cannot say exactly, but this is two or three, no more than that, working on this. They're bringing actually the expertise again from hydrocarbon-based PEM for the acidic membranes. And one of the groups in Italy, we are collaborating with them in Calabria, and we are trying to see what what are the effects of these fillers. Now, in the in PEM, in the acidic naphthalene or similar membranes, these fillers or the job of these fillers are quite clear. That normally was or to catch the radicals to avoid the degradation in the polymer, or to reduce the hydrogen permeation through the membrane, which is the crossover. Now, one of the advantages that I didn't talk about that now because this is second talk, but one of the advantage of this technology that we use hydrocarbon membranes. So hydrocarbon membranes like polyethylene, for instance, that Santiago is using, those are, they have, I would say, one order of magnitude lower permeation of hydrogen. So you can go not just thinner and keep the mechanical robustness, but you don't need to reduce, if we compare with PEM fuels, we don't need to reduce the the hydrogen permeation anymore. And that is, by the way, the one of the reasons why we have the OCV, the open circuit potential, much higher than in PEM, because the hydrogen crossover is very low, thanks to the membrane. So what we believe, but this is very early stage, we believe that we can maybe have some fillers that actually are used as a crosslinker, so to tailor the water uptake inside the membrane. And the second is to maybe change the morphology to increase the phase separation, so to increase or to tailor the channels, the ionic channels, to the right direction inside the membrane. So those may be the reason why to study an ion change membrane with different fillers. I call it fillers or hybrid organic inorganic membrane. Those maybe are good directions for research, unless all the hydrogen permeation study that we normally do with PEM.
Okay, thanks a lot for the comment, for the answer. We now have a question from Ana Laura, if you know her very well. And then basically the question you can see there. Okay, she's work on the CO2.
I'm sorry, you
Yeah,
were
the question
disconnected
is,
a few seconds. Yeah.
the question is why membranes with higher IECs can release CO2 faster than AEMs with lower IACs? Does it have relation with the mobility of the carbonate ions in higher ICs, AMCs, or not? What's the role of this carbonate for the CO2 release?
Yeah, Anna Laura probably refers to this slide, and that was for us a counterintuitive, I would say. We expected the opposite direction. Now it's very complicated. Now we are working on that in the modeling point of view to try to explain that better. But there are several factors affecting the release of the CO2. So one of them, of course, is the density of the cations. So you have higher density, like here in the red case. So you have closer. So then conductivity of the carbonate, that that the mechanism is different than the conductivity of OH minus. And the conductivity of OH minus can be higher, not just because of the size of the anion, but it can jump, yeah, like a Grotus mechanism. The carbonate cannot do that. So the carbonate actually need to jump from um, cation to cation to be conducting. So if you have higher density, the improvement of the mechanism of conduction of the carbonates are much faster than the improvement from the mechanism, for instance, that you have in the OH minus. In this competition, I would say, between the conductivity of the carbonate, the conductivity of the OH minus, the carbonate wins, and meaning you can release the CO2 or the carbonate much faster. However, it's not so simple as I mentioned. That is the reason we're now trying to model that, because actually when you increase the IC, you increase the water uptake. You increase the water uptake, you have more water, meaning the OH minus can enjoy more water and be transported much faster. So there are several factors affecting that. On the other or third side, I would say, the carbonate, actually, we work with carbonate. So the carbonate is divalent, you have -2. So actually, moving one carbonate is much more effective than moving at the same speed one OH minus, because you are moving charges actually. So there are several factors to both directions, and our intuition or my own expectation was the opposite. And those experimental are facts are the results. So in this case, the IC actually allows to move to release the CO2 much faster. And as I say, we may very soon be able to know more about what the membrane, what are the requirements. If you ask me what are the requirements for the membrane to release faster the CO2. So we don't know yet all what we need. So that's the reason of the need of the model, trying to identify the characteristic of the membrane to have a fast release.
Okay, thanks for the comment on the question. Now we have a question from João Paulo de Mendonça. He is a postdoc working on computational simulation here in the Cine. And his question is, how much do we know about the structure of the mixed particles, for example, the siroxide with palladium? Because normally we support palladium on siroxide, but you are put the siroxide support on palladium. And there's a very thin layer of, from what I understood from his slide, very thin layer of siroxide. Can you, to say, provide some additional information on the how does the structure? There's some characterization or something in this direction.
So this is a thanks for the question. This is a very complicated question, or actually, this is a simple question, very complicated answer. We started with a very simple chemical wet chemistry method to apply the palladium to Syria. At the very beginning, actually, Syria to palladium, and later palladium to Syria. The actual structure was very complicated. So at the very I would say last year, we found that the Syria, we have a nano dots of palladium decorated onto the surface of the Syria. Now, what we learned, or at least our idea was that if we have, as I show here, if we have these two materials, ideally the interface between those two materials is the real catalyst that promotes the oxidation of the hydrogen, releasing the water here. So we need those two materials be in touch. So the work we did to prove that was this new one that wasn't possible by wet chemistry. We used this controlled surface reaction, and that was the first time that we could see many pictures like this representative one, that actually we have a clear deposition of very small, here is 8 nanometers, so we are talking about almost atomic deposition of ceria onto a 8 nanometers, 5 nanometers of palladium. So I would say 80% of the STEM peak images that we got are like this one. So for the first time this year, we could say that we have a homogeneous decoration of cerium to palladium, and most importantly, that we didn't succeed to do that last year, until last year, that every or the absolute majority of palladium nanoparticles are covered, partially covered by ceria. So this is our understanding. So what I didn't present now, we are working with in collaboration with Yukon University on the DFT, which is very complicated DFT model trying. We're working for 2 years on that, and finally we got some insights from that. What actually is needed for this structure to be best than that? Now, putting that on hold, the most, I would from my humble point of view, the most interesting data come from this fundamental study, that actually we completely covered the palladium, and this is ideal surface because this is not nanoparticles, so that was much easier for us to characterize and to define. So we work with ALD. We deposit. We have a film of palladium, and then we actually, the reason we call buried palladium. We completely cover the palladium with ceria, and then we found that just when we completely cover, we reach the asymptotic maximum value of the HOR activity. So now we change a little this plus the DFT data, we change a little from what we thought we know until the past year, and we believe that what we need to have in this bifunctional material is a core of palladium completely covered with ceria, but with a thickness, such a thickness that will allow us to maximize and reach the maximum activity of the palladium. So we believe, and this is a theory, we didn't DFT or any other theoretical tool, that the ceria, even if you have a thick layer of ceria absolutely covering the palladium, the ceria, because of the oxophilic properties, still allows the activity of OH minus species through this shell, let's say, to the palladium. Then we have a completely ideal interface between the palladium and ceria, and then the water comes out through this ceria. All this is a theory. We just prove that with this new paper, and we need to do more, both in DFT. We didn't start that. Any collaboration on this will be really a very nice one and very new. And once we succeed with that, actually, so the next level is to ask us, so uh, is ceria the best oxophilic catalyst that oxide that we can cover the palladium? Maybe there are others. Maybe we can use mix of oxides. So we are working on that. And again, any collaboration in this field, that will be really very nice one. Another question will be, do we need palladium? How small the palladium size will be enough to get this? Maybe we can, now that we understand that we can increase the stability of this inner particles, maybe we don't need palladium anymore. So many questions are now open, and all the field is actually completely unexplored in this direction.
Very interesting point. Okay, I think I work in computational material science using the FT in a wide range of techniques, and then we have also studied the oxide of zero oxides supported on a metals or supported on it and somewhere else. It's a very complicated problem. Is one thing that will be interesting to see is it is possible to reduce the size of the palladium particles and keep the zero oxide and still stable, because once you reduce the size of the particle, it means the strain that you create in the seria could maybe have some instability on that. I think this is quite a very interesting point. And about the role of the oxygen vacancies. As you know, seria is very well known for our oxygen storage capacity you can release, and then how is the oxygen vacancy effects spread on the shell that surround the palladium. This if you be very, to say, play some role there. Okay.
So really interesting what you say, and that reminds me some also open question that we couldn't yet work on that this is if we reduce the size of the palladium, of course we in principle we're reducing the size of the particle of the ceria that are even smaller. So we know, or that there are a couple of studies that study um, um, the series stoichiometry, that if you have very small nanoparticles of ceria, actually you do not have ceria. You do not have Ce, cerium oxide 2, you have cerium oxide X being lower than 2, and how that affect as you said, how that also affect the hydrogen oxidation reaction. That's a really very interesting scientific question. Yeah.
Because based on my experience of all calculations, Dario, what I can add on the top of that is the following. If you have a very thin layer of ceria that surrounds the palladium particle, the charge transfer from the palladium to the oxygen that makes the interface to the ceria, you're going to have a large number of ceria atoms, which was changed the oxidation state from 4 plus to 3 plus, because the interaction with the metal and the charge transfer that flows from one to another. And then if the thin layer, if the ceria is very thin, you're going to have a mix of ceria 4 plus and ceria 3 plus, because the interface you create the change the oxidation state.
That's super interesting. I will be
That is
happy to continue this conversation with
well,
you.
so we can make continue. We have one further question now, question for our audience is the following: is what's the importance of the ionomer in the durability of the ion for the anion fuel cell? This question from Dre Barbosa. That is basically, what is the importance of the ionomer in the durability of the fuel cell?
So I'm not sure by ionomer if you mean both membrane or ionomer that we call ionomer, the binder in the electrode. But I will try to refer to that. Okay, sorry, I'm out of the.
Okay, maybe we can just say, because for me also is not clear.
Yeah, can you still see my slide, right?
Yes, now we can see your slide.
Okay, so I mentioned this very quickly and also very complicated, but what you see here, what I show here, is the result of simulation and numerical modeling that we have. What happened during the time when you operate the fuel cells? What happened to the fixed cations inside the cell? So we estimate, we calculate, we simulate the IEC, the ionic exchange capacity of the membrane. And when I say membrane, it's also the ionomer and the catalyst layer. So if you look at the black initial way, so 0, when you start, just before you start the operation of the fuel cell, this is the IC of the membrane. So here in gray area, you see the membrane, and then you see the electrode, the cathode electrode, and the left, the anode electrode. So you can see what the membrane we use. I don't remember this one, but it has like a 1.8, IC of 1.8. So the membrane has a lot of water that is allows to have by this 1.8 IC. When you start operating the fuel cell, so you are generating the OH minus. The OH minus actually are being solvated by the water molecule. So when the OH minus is transported to the anode, you are taking water with you, meaning that you need more water to be transported against this flow, which is very challenging for the fuel cell. If you increase the current density, this area, actually red area, you are consuming this water for the ORR reaction, and then you don't have water here to solvate the OH minus. And what we see in the model is exactly that. What happened after 10 or 100 hours, you start decreasing the IC here because of the degradation. So we measure experimentally the degradation rate at different lambdas. We introduced that into the numerical modeling, and now we can actually not just predict the lifetime of the fuel cell, we can see what happened to the ionomeric materials and the membrane inside the fuel cell. So what happened, as I mentioned before, you can see no change here in the membrane on the anode side. So the same membrane in the fuel cell, in one side of the membrane, you have completely stable cations, the same cation on the cathode. Because of this lack of water, you start losing this IC. Now, if you lose IC, you lose conductivity. You lose conductivity, you not just lose performance, but you lose water because the water uptake is going down. So water uptake going down, again, this is less water available. Water diffusivity goes down, so you can transport water here very quickly, and then the transport here is not so quickly. All that as a function of temperature. So it's an incredible long time of simulation that we need to solve this, but eventually we got these results. And we are now working with a colleague in Germany, trying to find a way to characterize the membrane through different layers to, after we, let's say, work 100 hours or even more, if we can characterize and measure the IC somehow on through the sectional area of the membrane. So the same happened with the ionomer. So I don't know if the question was ionomer for the catalyst layer, but it's the same answer. So you can see here, whatever was the IC normalized by volume. So it looks low, but this is volume normalized. Whatever the IC was here, there is no change during fuel cell operation. However, the same IC that we started the ionomer in the cathode, the ionomer ionomeric material that we added with electrocatalysts in the cathode catalyst
I think that we just lost the connection with Professor Dario Dekel for a few seconds. Okay, we just are waiting that he come back to the stage to continue his presentation, to continue to answer the questions. Uh, Basically, we just have to wait maybe 1 or 2 minutes. Then in case that he does not come back, then we're going to forward the questions that was not discussed here by himself, and then we're going to have this forward for him, which will be very helpful for all the participants that was here. Okay, we'll just wait for a few seconds to see if he is able to come back. Okay. At the meantime, I just would like to say that for the Cine webinars is happening every month. And the end of this month, we're going to have a new webinar focused on Professor Sheng, which he is going to talk for us on his research on the materials for photovoltaics. This will be at the end of November. And we are organized more one additional webinar for December, with the second week of December. This was not fully defined yet. Professor Dario is back with us.
Sorry about that.
No problem. It's fine.
I know that I was talking alone when I finish answering the question. So I have no idea when I lose you.
No, we lost most of we listened most of the answer. I think it was very great. Okay, as we are advancing time and also have the instability too, I have just one final question, and then because we have some until more, say maybe 2 or 3 questions, we can forward for you to know what was the reading of the participants. But then we'll go for the final question that we maybe the final question I have for you, Dario, is not directly related to the seminar, but it's related to your experience, because I saw from your biography that you worked many years, opened some different companies, work in different companies, then you come for the academics, okay? And the Cine, at the Center for Innovation on UNH, we have the willing to make it like a world-class research material science, but we also have the goal that at the far end to create like a spin-off that could work on that field, on those type of different field of material science. What advice could you give for our postdocs that are on the stage of the career in which they could get some adventure on the business sector? That your experience maybe could give some few words for us that could be very helpful for our audience.
That's my favorite question, I would say.
Okay.
I'm in the industry more than 30 years already. I still have my startup company that we sold, but I follow that, and myself will open from the Technion, being professor in Technion. I myself will open another startup company next year. That's the plan, at least. Because this is what I like. Now, the combination between research, academia, and startup is even more interesting. So I really don't know about Brazil environment, about startups and innovation. I believe it's a good one. Fortunately, in Israel, we are in an excellent situation that all the system actually encourages you to open startups and start new innovation, mainly in high technology. So that's an entirely, completely different talk that I can talk days on that. And I would say when you have an idea, doesn't matter your age and your experience and nothing else. If you do your homework and see if this is an original idea that answers to at least one need worldwide, somewhere for some niche, some product that answers some niche opportunity or whatever the needs in any field. So what we do in Israel is probably thanks to our mentality. So we take the risk and we go for it, and we open a startup and start working on that, raise money from many places as you can, and start working on that very focused on your idea. You do not move from that. And having said that, you need to be very flexible, because when you start your startup and you start your idea, you start getting into the deep understanding that what you thought is probably not the best. And then you need to be very flexible and move and to choose another needs and to move your technology to this application or to that application. But that is just fun, and this is really highly risky. But the alternative is that you do not do that, or you give to someone else, or you just keep dreaming that you would like to do and you will never try. So this is very clear, very, I would say, sincere message that if you believe you have that idea, you just need to go to the right people, raise money, and start doing, even when you do not know exactly to which direction and what you will do on next year. The uncertainties when you open the startup are 99%. So you know just a little from what you know what to do, and then you don't know maybe on the finance, you don't know how to raise money, you don't know how to keep users happy, you don't know how to publish you don't know how to marketing that, etc. So don't worry about that. You should know in advance that you don't know, and during the first years you will not know, and every year you believe that you know better and actually you still don't know. So there is no risk there. You know that, so you don't need to worry about that. You just need to do that. Keep insisting, and this is a really amazing world, and that combined to high tech and high technology and new materials or new technologies. This is amazing world that you don't need to be afraid of fail, because 99% of the chances that you will fail. So once you know that, you don't need to be afraid of that. You fail, you change your idea, come with a new idea, you start again, you learn again, and hopefully you do different mistakes and then to keep learning. This is an amazing way and very exciting um, uh, adventure, I would say, as you said.
Okay, thank you very much for the comment on that. I'm very happy that the way that you address the question, especially when you say that you will very glad to speak on that, because we could to say by sure in future invite you to come to Brazil to give a special lecture on that topic, and your experience could be very welcome for us, especially when you overcome the field that you are now crossing, and then can meet each other in the presential way. It'll be very nice. And then I thank you very much for the talk. I think it was a pleasure for us at Cine to have you here. Okay. By sure you have your collaborators here in Brazil already, but there's a chance that you could even this talk contribute to increase them further, and then it will be a very great opportunity for the future. Okay.
That will be my pleasure. I'm open for good collaborations and good people always, especially with Brazil. So muito obrigado for that as well.
And then I share that some Brazilians apply for postdoc positions, because I am the one that really support that we need to send our recent PhD students abroad for them to have a new experience in different places, different cultures, and to work with the best people. where they can share new experience. And this is very, I hope that several of them of us, some of our recent PhD students could apply for that, and you could choose a successful candidate.
That will be great. Again, we are very tiny, but many interesting places and many amazing things. The Technion is a really very good university, so it will be my pleasure to host anyone coming from your groups, guys, or from Brazil.
Okay, thanks.